want to ask you about J.D. Vance.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some parallels in your lives. Both of you, I guess you grew up in the South. I mean, legitimately the South, Tennessee. He grew up in both kind of Kentucky and in Ohio, in southern Ohio near Cincinnati. Middletown is the name of the town. And Kentucky was his grandfather's place. Had been from there. And
Yes.
but he told a funny story about his mama that when she died, she evidently couldn't walk anymore, and that they found 19 loaded guns in her house, set at different places, so that if an intruder came to kill her, she could crawl.
Yeah.
Fast
She'd always
enough.
be within arm's reach of a gun. Yeah. Well, that's just reasonable home defense, you know. Just how you do it in the holler in Kentucky. Yeah. No, I mean my papa, when my papa died, they were not loaded and placed at random intervals around the house, but like I inherited from my papa when he died like 17 guns, you know. So I mean, sounds about right.
Okay, so you're sort of northwest Tennessee. He's sort of southeastern Ohio and northeastern Kentucky. That's
Right.
it.
Yeah. I'm north middle Tennessee, but yes, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so his mom in Hillbilly Elegy, famously, she was a drug addict,
Mm-hmm.
and your
Yep.
mom became
Same.
addicted to opioids.
Yes. Opioid. Yep. Same. And it was a very, you know, and I mean, I think part of the resonance of Hillbilly Elegy when it came out was that, you know, that was not an uncommon experience in communities like, I mean, even in my town, you know, it was like most of my best friends had somebody close to them that were dealing with the ravages of opioid addiction. So, but yeah, for me and JD, it was our mothers specifically.
And so, but you had a pretty stable childhood once you moved in with your dad.
Yeah, yeah, and also like he chalks a lot of his up, you know, he gives a lot of credit to his grandparents and stuff. And I mean, I also do. My dad's parents were, you know, they were kind of, you know, they were rock solid, and my dad was very loving and supportive. We were, you know, broke and everything. We didn't have any money, but
Your dad owned the video store, right? As
yes,
I
in
recall.
Salina, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but with these commonalities, you must really, uh, really have a soft spot for J.D. Vance.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, I kind of did for a while because it goes a little beyond just that. Everything you just said is accurate, but also Hillbilly Elegy came out in 2016, and in 2016 was when I first like went viral on the internet for my like you know, funny political rant videos that I do, and I got
Which are
noticed.
hilarious, by the way.
Well, thank you. But yeah, that's when that first happened. I had been doing stand up already and wanted to be a comedian, was writing things and all this stuff. I was doing all that, but from anonymity in Knoxville, and then I went viral with those in 2016, like around the same time Hillbilly Elegy came out. So then I was going on like Bill Maher's show or CNN or Joy Reid or whatever, this type of stuff, to talk about, because this was right at the same time as like, you know, Donald Trump becoming a much more legitimate factor politically, and people like starting to be like, wait, something's actually happening here. What's going on? And like the narrative at the time was that that was due to his resonance with, you know, rural working class white people, poor white trash people, hillbillies, however you want to put it. Like that was like the prevailing theory everyone had to explain Donald Trump. And so like, you know, I would go on these shows and it's what people wanted to talk about. And the exact same thing was happening to JD at the same time because his book had come out. And, you know, I'm a comedian, and his got taken more seriously because it's a much more serious
It
effect.
is
Yeah.
a much more serious book, and it's about a lot of tragedy
Yes.
and
Yeah. And I had, and like me and the guys that I like toured with, we had a book come out later in 2016 that really talked about a lot of the same types of things. And like I talked about my deal with my mom in my hometown and stuff. And but we're comedians, so it's kind of irreverent tonally. I mean, you know, there's darkness in it and everything, but still, so it was like kind of slightly different, but a similar thing was happening, and all these people kept like bringing us up to each other, me and JD Vance, and so we got like I don't even remember who actually like put us in touch initially, but we like got in touch with each other somehow and like and just started texting and everything about like, man, this is crazy, right? Yeah, your mom was a pillbilly, my mom was a pillbilly. What's going
A
on? You know, isn't
pillbilly.
this? Yeah, right,
Okay, I
yeah,
got it. I
yeah.
figured that out.
But you know, and that was pretty much all it was. And then and then I would, you know, um, he lived in Columbus at the time. I get maybe he still does. I guess I'm not sure. He's probably got a couple of places, but
Well, he moved out to San Francisco, of course, with his wife.
yes. But at this point in time, at least what I know is I was touring as I'm all like you said. I saw you in Brooklyn the other night, and I'm always touring doing stand up shows, and I was doing that then too. And I was at the Columbus Funny Bone, and he and his wife, who was pregnant at the time, came to my show and like hung out in the green room, and then me and him went out to a bar afterwards and hung out for like 2-3 hours, just like nursing. But not, it wasn't like 80s SNL style.
So that must have been a big bonding experience.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was like I said, I made this video about him where I said, like, don't get me wrong, it's not like he charmed my pants off. It was kind of like pounding beers with a spreadsheet. I mean, he was kind of like he didn't have like the highest energy, but we were. It wasn't a party animal thing. I wasn't like, man, this dude's my brother. But I mean, we got along perfectly fine, and we talked about we talked about again the insanity of our lives and also like our hometowns and our mom, all that stuff. But we also talked about, like the upcoming election and the whole Donald Trump thing and how people were latching onto him or whatever. And how at that time we were both fully in agreement that that was crazy and we couldn't believe that was actually happening. And that, he was clearly a grifter and full of it and all this stuff. And we couldn't understand how.
So this is the period where he's kind of comparing him to Hitler.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, no, I mean he hated Trump, at that time. Just like it was like I had other friends like I shouldn't even say other friend. Again, I wouldn't even call him my friend. Once he started to get more MAGA and stuff, we eventually stopped like corresponding, and I haven't talked to him in forever at this point, or tried to. But like, um, he was like other friends that I had at that time who were like, like conservatives, but not crazy. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we don't agree on everything, but we can have a reasonable discussion about any of it. He's a reasonable guy. That's like the main thing that I thought about him at that time. And then gradually over the years, watching him from afar. But you said earlier about having a soft spot. Initially, when he first started to like pivot politically and stuff, initially I was kind of I did kind of defend him for a little while just because of that. I was just like, no, he's an all right guy. He's not so bad. But then eventually it reached a point where I was like, okay, well, I can't defend this.
Did you read? You must have read Hillbilly Elegy when this was happening. Was there anything in the book that you found a little bit like not your speed?
Very much so. There were a number of things and it was one of those things where it's like, and I'll elaborate on the specific things, but it was one of those deals where like at the time, I had signed like a development deal with Warner Brothers. I was taking all these Hollywood meetings and stuff, and all these Hollywood executive people at that time are just like, yeah, I mean, falling over this book. Like I mean, they just love it. Like it's just an insight into a world they've never seen before, and it's a world you understand, Trae. Let's make a show about it, whatever that type of thing. And it's like so. I read it, and it was like there's a lot of times I was like, okay, well maybe it just must be me because so many people love this, but they're part like it just make me feel weird sometimes. I'd be like, well, I don't know about that part. Like we had this shared experience in a lot of ways.
Is this about your both your moms, for example?
Yeah, but then not just that, but just I mean, not just our moms and the opioid stuff, but just like the culture at large and the people and everything about it. Like we grew up in similar type of circumstances, and I felt like I did not take away the same things from it that he clearly thought. Like there were parts of it that almost made me like I feel like he basically outright says at multiple points in that book. Like I feel like sort of the thesis of it is that the problems with like hillbillies or whatever are just that they're like just cultural in nature. It's not that it's not systemic problems. It's a problem with like the people. Like I feel like the undercurrent of it to me as I read it was like, I mean, they are just lazy. They don't want to work like that, like these types of things that that I was like, hey man, what are you doing? This is like, that's not cool. At least it didn't feel. And then there would be other specific things. Like he goes on this weird little tangent at one point about how people think payday loan places are predatory, but really they are lifelines to poverty stricken people or whatever. And I remember,
and that's why they charge
and
18% per week.
right. Yeah. And I remember reading that and being like, what? Like, like
He
it's,
also
I mean,
does this thing about food stamps too, right? He
yeah,
said that he just discussed it with guys who use their food stamps to buy or not to buy cigarettes, but they bought cigarettes with cash when they used the food stamps to buy food. And why should they be using their cash to buy? So we should stop food stamps.
right. Yeah. And not, these are all very like, pretty common conservative talking points around those types of programs, which I've also always taken very personally because it's always like, I feel like those arguments, a lot of them are the way the conservatives justify their position that people should just be left on their own, left to their own devices.
Once in the Senate, Bernie Sanders reported that the Republicans they want to cut food stamps. What kind of religion cuts food stamps? And I raised my hand and said Southern Baptist.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
only Harry Reid laughed. You and Harry Reid.
Me and Harry Reid.
Yeah.
Big company. But I've found a lot of times you have conversations with conservatives, and if you ask them a question like, do you think in a country that purports to be the greatest country on earth, do you think if a grown man or woman works a full-time job that they should be able to afford to live, and I feel like 99% of the time that person will go, yes, I do believe that. And then if you say, well, how do you account for the fact that that just is not true with like the wages people make in this country and lots of in lots of different areas, and they say something like, well, I'd need to see that person's budget every month. I'd need to see what they tell themselves that they're like, they just are dumb about money and wasteful, that they're just like, that they can't afford to live, not because wages are too low, but because they just blow it all on cigarettes and lottery tickets or whatever. Like they believe these things when I know that that's not, no one is like buying lottery tickets instead of like actual food, or something that well, I mean, I shouldn't say literally nobody, but it's not the pervasive problem that they act like it is. And JD clearly, was all about a lot of those arguments, even at that time. It's just like classically conservative stuff, but it felt like a kind of a betrayal to me because that was always part of my whole explanation for how are you a liberal redneck? How'd you end up the way you are? And part of the way I always explained it was like, well, I mean, I grew up like poverty stricken and poor, and I grew up on food stamps and all this stuff. And, I feel like conservatives would have allowed me to starve to death as a child. So I'm just not really down with them, and it's weird to me that somebody from a very similar background situation as me ended up on the exact opposite side of the fence. But I mean, really that happens all the time. But
and that was your dad. That was your dad raising you and not getting any child support from your mom.
Right. Yes. So like we had when my dad had the video store when I was like younger, and also the factory in town was still there, and businesses like the video store were like sustainable. Then the factory left, and the ripple effect of all that. But also my dad got chronically ill at the same time, and my mom was on drugs and everything. So by the time I was in high school, we just had no money. So my dad got food stamps, but like he didn't. We talked about it when I was on your show before, but like legally, my mom had custody of us, so my dad could like get food stamps, but not not the amount that you get for having 2 kids living in the house or whatever, because legally he didn't. Like my mom would get more food stamps than my dad would get because she would like claim us or whatever.
Because legally you were in your mom's house.
Yeah, or under her. Yeah, legally she
Legally,
had custody of us, even
right.
though we like never actually stayed with her or whatever. It was a whole thing.
By the
But
way, that your piece in your act on you're having to pay your own child support
yeah,
was brilliant.
thank you.
Anyway.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Got to mine it for something, you know.
And he was introduced to Trump by Peter Thiel.
Yes, right.
The Silicon Valley billionaire,
right?
Who he met at Yale Law School when Thiel came to speak, and Thiel kind of became his guy,
mentor. Yeah, JD's one of his I don't know, his blood boys or something. Or I don't know, Peter Thiel, I guess.
But Thiel evidently introduced him to Trump, brought him to Trump,
yeah,
and then put $15 million in his campaign.
Right. I mean, yeah, that definitely seems. I mean, he seems to be like basically an asset of Peter Thiel. You know, seemingly like Peter Thiel is definitely his kind of like sugar daddy mentor, whatever you want to call it, like his meal ticket in a lot of ways. And it does seem like he represents his interest. And and then these like tech guy, all that money going to Trump and his campaign, and it all just seems to like line up. To make a lot of sense that Vance is, Thiel's got his guy on the road to the White House or whatever, at least for now. I mean, as you're aware, like there's all these rumors swirling and everything that like Trump already has buyer's remorse on JD and is thinking about getting rid of him and everything, which would be pretty hilarious in my opinion. But who knows?
I don't think he does that.
Happen. Yeah,
you can't.
You don't think he just can't?
You can't. You can't.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that would be crazy, right? But
yeah, that would be admitting he made a mistake,
right?
He doesn't.
He seems fundamentally unable to do. That's a good point. Yeah.
So, are there any issue areas or you've been on the road, so maybe you haven't been able to pay much attention to but you have been. I saw your act last night, and you've been pretty current.
I try to, yeah, but what issues? What, like, you mean where JD is concerned, or you mean just generally, or
anything JD has said or that has gotten?
I mean, his, him being like him saying of just a full blown national abortion ban and all that stuff, and his like weird like, I don't like.
You should be able to. Someone with 4 kids should have 5 votes.
Yeah, then when you put those things, it sounds like kind of Handmaid's Tale-y, to me, like a lot of the rhetoric recently, like particularly dystopian, in feel or style or whatever. So yeah, I mean, yeah, he's been saying, and I feel like there's this big debate with JD, like how did he have a genuine, like, has he been like actually radicalized legitimately, like in his heart, and he just is like this and all this stuff? Or
it seems to me that's all of the Republicans have, anyone who ever had a problem with Trump comes over.
Right.
Because they have to.
Right. But it's because they have to, right? I mean, I was just, it's like at a certain point, he realized if he wanted to have any kind of legitimate, future prospects as a Republican politician, that he would have no choice but to like cozy up to Trump and try to make up for the error of his ways in the past and all that. But like, so I've always just thought it was, opportunistic on his part, and then he's just said what he needs to say and everything. But then, there's the argument of like, well, that some people think like, well, that, don't necessarily let him off the hook. Maybe perhaps he really does mean and believe all this stuff, and which one's worse and that whole thing. So
thank you for joining us. Any last words on this election year?
I mean, the JD stuff aside, I mean, maybe I don't think I feel like there's been like a kind of groundswell of energy and optimism in the past, week or a little more, like on the left. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, were like worried about, before Biden did drop out, the prospect of, if Biden drops out, like how are they being big Democrat, like, how are they going to handle that as a party? Because they don't have the best track record for not screwing things up, in big moments and things like that, or mishandling things, and people were worried about it. But I feel like they've largely like gone about it correctly so far. Like they really have mostly coalesced, record breaking, like fundraising dollars, and there just seems to be this energy. Like, I think optimistically people hoped that if Biden did drop out, it would serve as a shot in the arm, but we were like, you know will that actually happen? And I feel like it seems like it has been to me. So as of right now, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Long way left to go, but
Well, I
I'm
like
feeling
your
pretty good
opening.
about it.
Your opening was too much is happening.
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. would prefer
The last
fewer
4
things
weeks
to happen. Yeah,
has been something.
indeed it has.
Okay, Trae.
Appreciate it. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks.